Land expropriation without compensation. That's a whole lot of syllables to say one simple thing. We're going to take your land and we don't need your permission. And that's what the new leader of the ANC, Cyril Ramaphosa, announced in his State of the Nation address last month. And he's begun amending the constitution to make it happen. Back on the streets, we're going to take your land means one thing only. For them, we're going to take your land means we have political permission to kill you. The economic freedom fighters, the true face of the ANC, even have a song to rally their troops. Kill the Boer, kill the white man.
Shoot to kill, the massa. Shoot to kill 'em. Kiss the poor, the farmer. Kiss the poor, the farmer. Brr, pa, pa, brr, pa, pa. Attention.
So these people, when you want to hit them hard, go after a white man. They feel a terrible pain because you have touched a white man.
And their supporters are doing exactly that, using knives, wires, hot irons, and rape. We're going to take your land means we are going to kill you. But first, we're going to make you pay. Small children raped in front of their father before he is shot. Elderly farming couples burned with a hot iron. A son whipped with an iron bar before his mother. A baby dropped into boiling water. A blowtorch, hot coals, a gang taking turns slowly. This torture lasts for hours. I've spoken with the victims. This is not just about land. This is vengeance, payback for apartheid, and it is brutal. Mariandra's tiny children watched their father blasted away with a shotgun by a black gang. Her little daughter offered the gang her piggy bank if they would let her mummy live. For her, the dark is when the monsters come and she can't sleep anymore. There's no escape for her, not even with antidepressants and sleeping pills. Aged 8.
And that's when my husband got up for the last time. And it sounded like he was crying when he said, please. And the one guy said, oh, just kill him. And they shot him in the head in front of us. And he fell at my feet.
And your daughter saw all that?
She saw everything.
Mariandra buried her husband and gave birth to their son 5 days later. How much more can these people take? A serving policeman tells me those inside the force are complicit. Knowing their position of power relies on the approval of their ANC masters. He says there will be no white farmers left in South Africa within 3 years. Some say they don't have that long. The whites are being systematically cleansed from the land. The white man is up there with the white rhino, forced to the brink of extinction. And the only difference is that the world doesn't care.
Well, we're pretty focused on what's going on within our own borders, but it turns out it's not unique. The elites around the world are going crazy. For example, in France, National Front leader Marine Le Pen has been charged with a crime, a serious crime. What did she do? Well, in 2015, she sent tweets that showed executions committed not by her, but by ISIS. And that's a crime somehow, okay? In South Africa, the parliament has begun amending the constitution to allow land owned by white South Africans to be confiscated by the government without compensation. The motion was brought by Julius Malema, a longtime gadfly and violent nutcase, who clarified that he does not support killing the entire white population right now. So why does this matter? Well, I don't know. It's wrong. But also, we give South Africa huge amounts of taxpayer money every year. Last year, we gave them more than $350 million in aid, obviously administered by the government, the ANC. Marc Stein is an author, columnist, and world traveler, and he joins us now. So let's go very quickly in order now. So to South Africa, which is such a depressing story that it's almost hard to bring up. But the bottom line is, for decades, the left of the United States was against apartheid, and good for them. I mean, it's worth being against that. But they also were champions of the ANC, the African National Congress, which has been in power ever since '94, and they basically destroyed the country, and now they're attempting to turn it into Zimbabwe by crushing the minority in that country. So, okay, they're doing that. Why are we subsidizing it with U.S. taxpayer dollars?
Yeah, you've got a point there, Tugger. But just on that, the left was right to be against apartheid. They were in South Africa. Just for the record, I regard what Chuck Schumer is doing, rejecting Trump judicial nominees on the basis of race, as progressive neo-apartheid. And I don't like old-school apartheid or the new school Democrat Party apartheid. What's happening in South Africa? In 1980, Robert Mugabe was told, you don't have to make the same mistakes as the first generation of independent African nations like Tanzania and Ghana 15 years earlier. He went ahead and made them supersized, especially with regard to white farmers. 15 years later, the ANC was told, you don't have to make the same mistakes that Robert Mugabe made in Zimbabwe. Now they're actually doing it all over again, with the difference being this. South Africa is the economic anchor of that continent. And it has existed with one foot in the developed and one foot in the developing camp since the corrupt ANC took over a couple of decades ago. If they actually turn South Africa into an economic basket case like Zimbabwe, that has huge consequences, including the fact that millions and millions of people will be sent scurrying over the Mediterranean into Europe.
No, it's totally true.
And the State Department should not be subsidizing that.
I agree. And liberals pretend it's not happening, which is actually patronizing. Why are liberals giving cover to one of the most corrupt regimes in the world? I've never understood that. I don't understand them. Marc Stein.
It's virtue signaling.
Well, that's exactly. You're right. I guess I do understand. Such a good point.
That's it. Yeah, the fact that they're miserable makes no difference. Miserable lives ruined, people murdered.
Exactly. The great Marc Stein. Thank you, Marc.
The expropriation of land without compensation is envisaged as one of the measures that we will use to accelerate redistribution of land to black South Africans. We will need to determine collectively how we can implement this measure in a way that promotes agricultural production, improves food security, advances rural development, reduce poverty.
All right, let's stop right there before I throw up. I mean, why not just evacuate?
No. Our forefathers built this land with faith in God, blood, sweat, and tears, Alex, and they built something beautiful. We will not go. We will not capitulate to the face of barbarianism. It's an unacceptable proposition. We will stand here.
But we don't want everybody to die. We don't want everybody to die, but they're going to die. They're going to kill you and then kill themselves. You can't help them. You're standing in the way
Alex,
of Wakanda.
We are going to stand if we are the last Christian nation in the history of the world that stands for Almighty God. We will stand and fight and die here. Watch us.
If you are receiving this transmission, you are the resistance. So here's Julius Malema. About 7 months after our guest joined us to warn of this, he said he would do just this. And we're about to go to our guest. This is what he's now saying about taking the white people's farmland, which, by the way, is the most productive and employs the most people. And when they took it in 5 other African nations and they totally collapsed into cannibalism, just like Venezuela, you can't call people dying from starvation saying they died from starvation. Here it is.
The expropriation of land without compensation is envisaged as one of the measures that we will use to accelerate redistribution of land to black South Africans. We will need to determine collectively how we can implement this measure in a way that promotes agricultural production, improves food security, advance rural development, reduce poverty.
All right, let's stop right there before I throw up. We have another clip where they talk about we're not going to kill all the whites yet. Everywhere else this happens, I mean, I just don't know why they don't just get secret technology from Wakanda. But what's happening is they want to kick the Wakanda technology out. They want to kick the Dutch and British Afrikaners out of the country. And, you know, the problem is the West didn't let those poor folks get out. So it looks increasingly they're just being murdered. And joining us is Simon Roche. Thank you for coming on. Again, the websites are suidlanders.org, and free, STARTR. Tell folks how you best pronounce those. You've got all the videos, all the articles, the videos of white farmers being murdered, the media celebrating it, like they celebrate cops being killed here. This is what the Marxists do everywhere. Give us a report since you joined us last year, and what you predicted has now come true. He's now president, and he's now calling for your land to be taken, and we'll play the clip coming up. He says he's not going to kill you quite yet, though, so he's being liberal. You should thank him.
Yes, well, Cyril Ramaphosa, the guy that you just featured in your clip, is the new president of the Republic of South Africa. And shortly after gaining the presidency, he made it very clear that land expropriation without compensation, and this is vital for people to know, but not only land, as in farmland, but white-owned property will now be subject to expropriation. And 2 days ago, the Parliament accepted a motion to initiate a process to change the constitution of the country so that this can go ahead. The motion proceeded with 241 votes to 83. So there was overwhelming support for it. And clearly, we are now entering that phase where white-owned property, as it has been defined, not merely land, especially land, but not merely land, white-owned property will now be confiscated or expropriated without compensation.
And by the way, you corrected it when I had you on. The president called for the confiscation without any compensation of white farmer land that produces, I know, the majority of the food. And we'll talk about those numbers in a moment. He's saying take the land without compensation. It's Julius Malema, the communist leader, who says we're not going to kill you quite yet. So you've got the good cop just says we're going to take your land. The bad cop says we're going to kill you. Let's go ahead and play Julius Malema. Here it is.
We, the rightful owners, our peace was disturbed by white men's arrival here. They committed a black genocide. They killed our people during land disposition. Today, we are told, don't disturb them. Even when they disturbed our peace, they found peaceful Africans here. They killed them. They slaughtered them like animals. We are not calling for the slaughtering of white people, at least for now. What we are calling for is for peaceful occupation of the land. And we don't owe anyone apology.
Yeah, first we take your land, then we kick you off the internet like Hitler did the Jews, then we kill you. And I forget the numbers, but guys, can you look it up in the World Almanac online? I want to say Africa's population is 50 times what it was when colonization started 400, 500 years ago. I mean, the West has brought nothing but overall good. Just like America's, when you got here, the natives would kill you if you didn't help fight the other natives. They were always killing each other. Just like Europeans before the Renaissance were killing each other. This idea that everybody's so loving in Africa, the Africans were saying, you buy slaves or we're going to kill you. Because that was the main business, was blacks selling blacks. And then the Arabs came in and did it. The blacks were all for it because that was their main business. So let's, we'll also roll some of the footage of what's going on, the attacks on whites, the burning of buildings, the burning of infrastructure, because it's this thing that the leftists do here and happens in Africa as well, just burn the infrastructure down and knock your electricity out. Why do folks do this, and why is it escalating?
It's escalating because the government has failed to deliver on anything that it's promised over recent years. The government has been in power now for almost 24 years. That is to say, the African National Congress Party of Nelson Mandela fame. In 24 years, the life expectancy has declined by at least 4.3 years, which is almost impossible to do, but it has been done. And indeed, if you follow the statistics of the United States Census Bureau, released in late 2016, then the decline in age, life expectancy, is far greater. It's approaching 10 years. The unemployment rate, the official rate is 38.1%. The unofficial rate is obviously far higher and more realistic. At the recent United Nations AIDS conference held in South Africa, Global AIDS Conference, it was revealed that 19%, so 1 in 5 practically, of all AIDS cases in the world is in South Africa. It's a shambles. It's an absolute shambles. I live in a little, very small village on the banks of the famous Orange River, named for Prince William of Orange, the Protestant chap who stood against Spain. And we have recently discovered that our African National Congress municipality has lost 7 million rands worth of money that was paid for electricity.
And let me stop you right there. Let me stop you right there. Rhodesia, then Zimbabwe, all these other places, the Congo. First they nationalize, then they make the whites keep working on the land, then they kill them, then everything collapses, then they have multi-billion, famous inflation. Why is Africa so corrupt? Once the evil colonists are kicked out, then you should have, Wakanda. It should be like spaceships and the vibranium and everything, which would be great. I mean, I love Africa. It's a beautiful country. I mean, a continent, a lot of beautiful countries. I want them to do well, fellow humans. But this thing about get the whites out that brought the civilization, why does it then recede back into total barbarism with everybody starving, but the president's son has 100 Lamborghinis?
Let me put it to you this way. Shortly after that chap, Cyril Ramaphosa, our new national president, was elected the president of his party prior to becoming the national president, he and a group of senior people went to Nelson Mandela's grandson, who was a traditional leader, as a chief. And they sought permission to go to Nelson Mandela's grave to shake his bones. That is to say, to invoke the ancestral spirit of Nelson Mandela to reinvigorate the African National Congress Party. And that is indicative of the gulf between one culture and another. They're so far apart that they're irreconcilable. It's just as simple as that, Alex.
Well, why not evacuate? I mean, because they're gonna get killed. And I mean, why not just evacuate?
No. Our forefathers built this land with faith in God, blood, sweat, and tears, Alex, and they built something beautiful. We will not go. We will not capitulate to the face of barbarianism. It's an unacceptable proposition. We will stand here.
But we don't want everybody to die. We don't want everybody to die, but they're going to die. They're going to kill you and then kill themselves. You can't help them. You're standing in the way
Alex,
of Wakanda.
We are going to stand if we are the last Christian nation in the history of the world that stands for Almighty God. We will stand and fight and die here. Watch us.
No, I actually respect that and I understand it. And I know what you guys have been through. It's been hellish. I know you've been really good to the locals, built everybody up, the population exploded. And there's a lot of black folks that actually don't want to see everybody go. But, they get killed and hacked up, don't they? I read about it all the time that the blacks that want to work with everybody, they get killed, don't they?
Yeah, it's a very, very big problem. That factor is referred usually as intimidation. So in other words, anybody who doesn't toe the party line gets chopped to pieces. There are tens of thousands of examples.
Didn't Winnie used to hang the gasoline tires over little kids' heads? Her favorite thing, she said, was hearing little kids' heads pop, and then they like to do that. The necklacing is what it's called. It's very liberal. We'll be right back. Simon Roche is a leader of a Christian organization, and I've studied the factions and things. It's very fascinating. I've read quite a few books on it in South Africa and how the country got set up, the different factions that were involved, the Zulus, and then the ANC, and then the Afrikaners, the Dutch that were Protestants, and then the British came in the Boer War, and Winston Churchill. I mean, I probably only read 8, 9 books on it. That sounds like I'm bragging. That's actually not a lot. It's very interesting. So why don't you just quantify who you guys are, the biggest group still of farmers, going back to Dutch background and others, holding on, feeding a large portion of the country, kind of like Amish do in several South American countries where they produce over 80%. So you're kind of Amish-like folks that went to South Africa, and now they're announcing they're going to kill you. They are killing you. The second largest party says they're going to start killing you. The president says, no, we're just going to take their land and just throw you out into the bushes. and you got really mad earlier, and I wasn't trying to get you riled up. I was just saying, why not evacuate? And you got pretty animated there. So tell us who you are, and for people out there watching, quantify that. This is a short statement. We'll come back to the next. And then talk about why you're so dedicated.
Well, our organization is called Suidlanders, which means Southlanders. We are the largest non-state-owned civil defense organization in the world, and we're constituted under international law, particularly Protocols 1 and 2 additional to the Geneva Conventions, which make specific provision for identifiable ethnic groups to group together in conditions of conflict where they are threatened. And we are preparing for a civil war, the civil war that has now been promised to us by our former president, by Julius Malema, by the head of the Constitutional Court of South Africa. The list just goes on, and not least our Minister of Defense, who recently promised a genocide. This was broadcast.
That's right. The communists run the Defense Department in South Africa now. Yeah,
absolutely. Bear in mind that the African National Congress political party is actually only 1/3 of a greater organization. 1/3 of it is the political party, 1/3 of it is a trade union organization, and 1/3 of it is the South African Communist Party. Indeed, Nelson Mandela remains...
Well, they've always been the heart of it, for those that don't know. But expanding on this, the left always does this everywhere. They say, whether it's just an issue between communist and capitalist, or whether it's black or white, they say, be liberal, let us take over, we'll be sweet. Then they always enslave and kill. Venezuela, it's not even cultural, it's political. They were as rich as the U.S. or richer, just like Argentina. Now they're eating out of trash everywhere. Total collapse. Thousands are dying a week from starvation, but the government passed a law where you can't call it starvation. I mean, this is what communists do.
This is what they do, Alex. They always do it, and there's never an exception. And you can see it, and I say this in humility and respect. You can see it in certain United States cities that I visited for 6 months last year. That the trend is so clear and so consistent and so reliable and so dependable, there's just no argument to be held about this. Our goal is to safeguard the welfare of non-combatant civilians in a crisis which we are preparing for right now, and which we've recently been promised repeatedly. As I say,
we're going to go to break, but give us a timeline. 10 years ago, people didn't listen to you. Now, everybody's listening because it's happening.
Yeah, that's right. People are listening, and we are trying desperately, last minute, to try and prepare for it. And that's why we are begging the world to support us. We just started a free starter campaign in the USA with Charles C. Johnson and the support of some American senators. And we are imploring people, please help us. We desperately need help. There is big trouble coming here.
And we got George Soros in the WikiLeaks wants to overthrow Israel. And I mean, it's every Western little enclave is about to be annihilated. Why do you think that is?
It's a thing that goes back thousands and thousands and thousands of years, Alex. This fight between good and evil is unrelenting. It's nothing special. It's nothing original. I see that you've just brought up the campaign. It kicked off about half an hour ago. And yeah, there you've got it there. And we just have to keep up the fight.
We're going to talk about it when we come back. But by the way, we're in the same position, so we need support as well. But people need to support you like last time because they're trying to shut us down ahead of persecution. Simon Roche runs the biggest civil defense group in the world. It's basically Dutch, quasi-Amish. And a lot of them have been overrun. A lot of them have been killed. Just like in 5 other African nations, Zimbabwe, the most famous, there were, something like 1 million white farmers there. Then it fell down to less than 20,000. They were still producing almost all the country's food. Now they're all gone. Just a few years ago that the government raided the houses and mainly killed a few thousand elderly that just couldn't leave. They'd already given the farms over, the tractors, everything. They usually would move them into like a shed, and they just came in and blew their heads off. And the national TV celebrated it because it's liberal. You know, white people must be racist and bad. And now the country has completely collapsed into total hell on earth. And I just don't think the average leftist realizes that this whole communist programming and trying to make blacks racist and turning everybody against each other here in America is a communist tactic, and that Mandela was a communist. His wife famously would line up children and put tires over their heads, put gasoline in, and burn them up, and sit there and go, while they did it. This is who we're told to worship. You'll get rid of one thing, apartheid, that I think was bad, but you have to understand it's a total barbarous state with different groups, and the British came in and took control of it and then exploited it. I'm not bashing Brits. I'm Welsh. The point is the British Empire. And then you think of Afrikaners and other groups that were already there, in many cases living in peace with the natives, who wanted them to come in and create agriculture and jobs. And then now you've got black, racist, nationalist, communist saying, kill the whites. We just played that last hour. This is a nightmare situation. So you should support them. Their plight is very, very serious, and it's something that our media won't even cover. Remember all the free South Africa stuff? Well, I was for that, but I knew that it didn't need to be replaced with communism. It needed to be replaced with a more equitable, free market system. That hasn't been done. The multinationals are being more exploited than ever. They just get private mercenaries to guard the very mines instead of actually investing in the country. In fact, I've seen numbers that investment from the mines and investment from the big industrial agriculture is plummeted under black rule. I'm going to say that again. The black leaders are keeping the money for themselves. Not like the white leaders who were sharing power, were putting it back in because they live there, stabilize things, let's have a nice life. No. So, again, they're replacing one bad thing with something 50 times worse. We'll talk to him in a moment, but listen, folks. So we've got communists saying murder conservatives, murder libertarians, murder Trump, murder all the whites in South Africa, and their answer is how bad we are because I take my shirt off. It is simply incredible. And they never let us respond to it. They make false charges. All right, Simon Roche of the Southlanders, the Civil Defense Group, he was here with us last year, over 6 months ago, and he warned that the new president was about to get in, who said he wanted to take all the land from white settlers who'd been there 400 years in some cases. He has the emergency plan, the only one of its kind in the world. Yeah, nobody ever stands up. They just incrementally get picked off and picked off and picked off. Mainly they got to defend the old folks. And now they have the defense minister, who's number 2 in the government, the communist leader, saying we're going to kill the whites. We just played those clips earlier. So please continue, sir, and tell folks how they can support your organization.
Well, we have a good plan, we have good membership, and we have lots of experience, training, and skills. Unfortunately, in the new South African Rainbow Nation, as the Liberals call it, we are persona non grata. It's very difficult for us to raise money. People have lost their jobs for less than supporting an organization like us. So we are asking for people to help us financially so that we can purchase diesel fuel, medicine, food, tents, and clothing for women, children, the elderly, and the disabled. We need support from the whole world. I have just received a message, I'll quote it to you. Julius Malema, who you had on earlier, says the following: we want to teach these white people we mean business about property expropriation without compensation. He then went on to say, in front of a very excited audience, we are going for your white man to cut the throat.
And we just played him saying, we're not going to kill you quite yet, but now he's saying that in your country, the defense minister you pay taxes to says he's coming to racially murder you.
Yes, that's correct. Alex, things are reaching a crisis now. It has been building up for a long, long time, very gradually. Indeed, our new president, Cyril Ramaphosa, who you also had on earlier, is famous for having said some years ago, we are going to treat the whites like a frog in hot water. We're going to boil them so slowly they won't realize until it's too late, and then they'll be dead. That's the situation we're in. It has been building up to this point, and now we're about to hit the wall at 100 miles an hour. A big crisis is coming here. We have never. Well,
you can see that he's hyping people up. He's getting them ready to obviously invigor the Communist Party so it completely takes over and then has a red terror.
Well, it's exactly as Dr. Gregory Stanton of Genocide Watch in Washington, D.C. said. He said this is the path that they follow. And right towards the end, they use this dramatic rhetoric to get the blood racing, and then they launch their
Well, let me say this. When somebody says, we're coming to kill you because of your race, and they're a defense minister, I'm not calling for this, but generally, if somebody ends up taking this guy out, he asked for it. And everybody around him. I mean, when they say, we're coming to kill you and your family because you're white, I'm the defense minister, he has that power to do it. He needs to be removed right now because this is unbelievable.
Oh, Alex, it's not unique. It's a she as it happens, but it's not unique. You know, in the middle of last year...
Well, I'm confused then. Julius Malema, leader of the Marxist opposition, we played the clip earlier. He said, we're going to, you know, we're not going to kill you all yet. And you were just quoting, I guess, one of his adjuncts, because these names escape me. Go back to, and just be clear. Who said the latest?
The latest is from Julius Malema. I beg your pardon. I thought you were talking about the defense minister, which is a she.
Okay, so so she's doing it too. Julius Malema is the leader of the Marxists.
That's right. And
so you've got the defense minister. You've got okay. I thought it was just him doing it. So you've got the defense minister. No. You've got the number two party. You've got the president saying take your land. Good God.
And boil them alive like frogs. And that it doesn't end there. The head of the Constitutional Court, the brother of one of our former presidents, the head of the African National Congress's private militia, of which Nelson Mandela was head, the very famous terrorist organization Mkhonto we Sizwe, which means the spear of the nation, in the middle of last year, said it is time now for blacks to come to training camps in the bush to learn to fight whites in a civil war. There are many people who are talking about this, Alex.
But again, it happens in every African country where the whites are basically pushed into a minority position, Zimbabwe, you name it. Why do you think you're going to be different? Because you're ready for it? You've seen history?
It's not that it's going to be different. We're going to suffer very, very badly. But we happen to be a group of people, and there are many of us, who are willing to stand for what's right, because it's not acceptable. And to leave here and to emigrate to America or Australia or New Zealand is not the solution. For our children to be exposed to the same perversity and pornography and abortion and drugs that is being implemented in all of the European-derived societies around the world.
Sure, and the Islamists is being brought in. Sure, so I mean, to be clear, you're basically living a very, very Amish lifestyle, very close to that, Mennonite, just out there producing food for the rest of the country. What percentage do the white farmers produce still in South Africa? I know previously it was a tiny minority produced the majority.
Yeah, there are only about 40,000 white farms, of which 21,000 are now for sale, believe it or not. I read the figures.
So there is a massive evacuation now taking place.
Well, people are terrified, but the whites in South Africa produce, I'm estimating, but I'll estimate conservatively, very, very easily 70% of the food consumed in this country.
And that's what's crazy. In every country, they kick you out and then it collapses. Why don't they have the Wakandan dream? Why doesn't that happen?
Because the notion of the goose that lays the golden egg is a fallacy in certain cultures. We have a tendency as white people around the world to say we see things this way, so they should too. No, it's a different culture, different values, different norms, different mores. And there is a notion in Africa that it is better to have 100% of 10, in other words, to control everything, than to have 10% of a million. In other words, to have more, but to be sharing.
Unbelievable. There is a global corporate government that's free market that pays zero taxes and is ultimate capitalist, but in a crony fashion. Obama traveled to Africa. He traveled to South America just 2 years ago. I remember he gave the speeches saying, now to graduate students, communism's good for you, but then capitalism's good internationally. Now, I don't do a good imitation, but you're going to be communist, meaning you're a slave. You can't have air conditioning or cars. He actually said that in Africa in 3 different speeches. But then we're going to be rich and fly around on jet airplanes. But it's for the environment, and then you pay your money to us, and then we're exempt. Amazon's owner is worth $115 billion last time I checked. He makes $1 billion every 3 days profit. The company, separate from him, made $5.6 billion last year and paid zero tax. Now, these virtue signalers pay no tax, just like Warren Buffett basically pays none. Google pays almost none because they set it up, but then they tell you the middle class isn't paying enough. And it's the same thing. Then they fund communists to take over because it'll be one communist kingpin with the military, and they just pay off that person maybe $500 million every decade. A lot of these African countries, they buy them off for a couple $100 million. And they can exploit everything. Or as long as the leaders get tribal and say, kill the white man, they can stay in power. But what's happening in a bunch of countries, as soon as all the whites are dead, it doesn't work because They celebrated in Zimbabwe when the last white farmers 2 years ago got killed. And now the leader's out finally because they're like, there is no more white man. Where is it? We want all this money. Everything's bankrupt. That is exactly what happens. But I don't want to see the Afrikaners leave. I don't want to see the Southlanders leave. But most of them have already left. You heard that. Half the farms of 40,000 are up for sale. I don't blame them, but I get also sticking to it because when you've been bullied so much, you have nowhere else to go. They have attacked me, and I don't usually do this on the show, but I mean, look what it's like now. It's like they said, you know, Rush Limbaugh said that they were trying to promote black quarterbacks over white quarterbacks. Whether that was true or not, they tried to boycott him and remove him 10 years ago. Now we've moved on to Alex hugged me once and his hand went down a little far, and then that's not even true. And then the news calls it sex assault. And then there's bodybuilding on a computer because we're trying to light a bodybuilding shoot, and that becomes gay porn, and that becomes gay, what was it called? Being groomed. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine how ridiculous? But they don't care. It's the headlines. Going back to my guest, Simon Roche, we're on the same page of Southlander with the extermination. The president announcing they're taking your land. The defense minister announcing they're going to kill you. The number two minister, the communists, announcing they're going to kill you. Our media, total media dead silence on this. That after the apartheid dream is over, and now the dream of Mandela, like Winnie says, kill all the whites. We're right back to where we were with Mandela bombing white schools.
Yeah, we're back. We've kind of come full circle. You know, we're in a situation where the chickens have come home to roost, and we've got to deal with realities of unemployment and AIDS and massive corruption that, with all due respect, Alex, you couldn't even begin to imagine. It's a whole different story that would take hours to tell. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions being plundered all of the time, incessantly. And it just kind of pops up in the news and then it goes away. But you know, our news are perverts just like CNN and BBC and others are. They are, you know, it's a defensible appellation to use. They are perverts. BBC covered something this morning on their homepage about one of Trump's, the main article, the lead article, one of Trump's ladies, assistants, whatever, I don't know what her role was, is leaving because she's achieved what she wants to achieve, in her words. But they tried to make it into a scandal, and yet BBC will not cover that in one of the top 40 countries in the world with the largest, by far, mineral reserves in the world, namely South Africa, the country that controls the southern sea route should the Suez Canal ever be closed down, is now passing a motion to confiscate all white-owned property without compensation.
It's incredible. We're out of time. We're out of time. Tell folks the website for radio, not just TV viewers, how they go donate for your civil defense.
Please donate at Free Starter. It's an American organization, a crowdfunding organization owned by Charles Johnson. It's Free Starter / South Africa. Our own website is, and you can donate there too via PayPal, is Suidlanders.org. SUID Landers.org.
All right, thank you, brother. We're out of time. We'll talk to you soon. Incredible. You predicted it all last year. It's happening. InfoWarsStore.com, InfoWarsLife.com. We need to really raise massive funds to fight these allegations or they'll be successful. InfoWarsStore.com, 30 to 80% off store-wide. Right now, it's a total war. The Second American Revolution is global.
You know, someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism.
If you are receiving this transmission, you are the resistance.
Simon Roche is the head of the office of the HQ of the world's largest non-state civil defense organization in South Africa. And in many other countries, once communists take over or leftists take over, they slowly isolate the whites, put them basically in controlled areas, farm ghettos, and then start exterminating them. That's now accelerated in South Africa. It's been basically complete in Zimbabwe. Tens of thousands of whites killed. The leftist media in the West celebrates it. They teach at major universities it's good. And now the second most powerful party in South Africa is set to take power, openly saying they will kill every white left, 8% of the population in South Africa. Talk about your emergency plan, Simon, and just how dire the situation is, and tell the folks here in the U.S. and around the world what it's like to be there, because I know they've taken most of your guns in the last decade or so, and of course now that's accelerated the white genocide.
No, that's just about accurate. For a long time we've been predicting these things. We're not hidebound by doctrine as many people are. You know, they're supposed to conform to the narrative of the new South African Rainbow Nation. Our organization, Saatlanders, the largest of its kind in the world, as you said, operates on facts, statistics, data, true information, and it is very much the way that you've described. There's an ongoing decline in South Africa particularly, or Southern Africa, and it is indisputably driven by globalist capital forces. That's beyond any sort of doubt. The South African political scene is dominated by the African National Congress government of Nelson Mandela fame. They are now challenged very heavily for their original political territory by a Leninist, Stalinist political party called the Economic Freedom Fighters, whose leader very famously in recent months has said that blacks should invade white farms with the spear in the hand. The reality is that the chances of a white farmer in South Africa being murdered on his farm are more than double the chances of a policeman in this violent society being killed. Now, when a man who tills the soil stands more than twice the chance of a crime fighter in a violent society dying, then you know that there's something wrong. The statistical likelihood of a white person being murdered by a black person in South Africa is more than 12,000% higher than any black person in the USA ever stood of being lynched. We're not condoning lynching. We're saying get a sense of perspective, people.
The persecution of whites in Africa, the persecution of whites in Africa is larger than persecution statistically that's been done to blacks in this country.
By more than 12,000%, that's correct.